Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Hey, Typher Zero. Happy Wednesday. We are live for another masterclass session. Today, we're going to be showing power users how to create top-down mountains. That's mountains not too dissimilar from what you see on the screen here. This is a companion guide that was made for the stream. There are 4 types of mountains. This guide only covers what's called fold mountains, which is probably the most recognizable or most iconic when it comes to fantasy maps because of the way that they look with those kind of pyramid-like mountains. It's basically these type of mountains right here. These right here are what you would call fold mountains. Now we'll cover more than just fold mountains, and I will make a guide on how to make all 4 of the different types of mountains. So this guide is particularly for fold. If you like this guide or you find this useful, you can totally clone and edit it. The link is provided at the top of the chat. Hey, first time chatter, Rune Bears, Maps, glad that you're here. McAnders, Alice, all of my favorite people already here. Awesome. Loving this stuff. Great. Love to see. Oh, Payday's here as well. Awesome. I love to see all these beautiful faces. That's wonderful to see. So as I was mentioning, if you want to clone and edit this map for your own personal use, go right ahead. I have that provided at the top of the chat. Again, I'll make guides for all 4, and we'll also cover how to make all 4 in this stream as well. So definitely go check that out. So I'll go ahead and turn that off. Now I want to go over a couple things. First is that you should be at this stage on your map. That means that you already have the land masses already placed out before you jump into making the mountains. And the reason why I suggest that is because if you are just jumping right into making the mountain without having the land, it's difficult to decide how the mountain shape will look, right, without having the land there first to work with. So my recommendation is that you should be at this stage of your map making before you make before you decide to make these mountains with the tools, okay? Let's go ahead and go over the types of mountains real quick. And there are 4 types. The one that you saw in the guide was called fold. And that's the most common mountain that you kind of see in fantasy maps, is those kind of pyramid-like or kind of a V shape or an A shape, right? So they're kind of pointed, and we'll make those first. There's also what's called a block mountain, what you might consider like a mesa. It kind of has a flat like top. There's also volcanic mountains, and volcanic mountains obviously are formed from, molten magma and lava flowing up. And then you also have dome mountains, which means they just kind of have like a curved top to it. So I'm going to show you how to make all 4 of those. And I'm going to go down here, and I want to mention what is actually helpful is the different types of strokes that you can use when you're making these type of mountains. You can use a solid black color, or you can also use this, I think what it's called Hill, and it's from the Battle Map Classic. That's that black and white style that classic style that we just added with the 2.0 release. I find that stroke also works as well because it already has some built-in ridges into it. You can adjust these ridges by changing the opacity or making it blur or whatever, but I find these 2 things work best. At least these are the 2 that we're probably going to use when we put these together. So now that you know each type of mountain, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this guide off, and we'll just jump right into creating a mountain right off the bat. And I'm going to start with this spot right here. This is a nice little spot right here. It has a nice little horn right here. It's got a little bay right here, a bay here. So this will work really quite well. And I'll go over to my line tool, and I've already got some stuff in my favorites kind of saved here, but I'll kind of go over each one of these. So this first one, I've got it set to size 68. I've got it blurred a little bit. The blur is set to 5. And I am using a pen, just to let you know. So if you're wondering like how am I making those curved lines and stuff, it's because I am using a pen, though you can also use a mouse. And the way that you start first is we want to create the line work of the mountain. And when it comes to fold, you should start by creating what's called the first ridge. That's going to be the main ridge in which all the highest points are kind of located on that ridge. And I'm going to use the terrain as kind of my guide, right? So maybe I want to have a ridge that kind of goes in like this, travels along here, and then goes to right about here like this, right? So there's my main ridge. Now, if you don't like the thickness of it, if it's too thick or it's too dark, you can always bring the opacity down. up or down. You can blur it more or less. It's just up to you because what we're building here is the line work, right? So I'll just go ahead and pick it. I kind of want it to be somewhat pronounced because it's the main ridge, okay? And then from there, I'll go ahead and use that same line again, but this time I'm going to maybe bring the opacity down a little bit more, and I'll also bring the size down a little bit more as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called the secondary branches that are going to come off. So let's bring the opacity back up a little bit so I can at least see it. There we go, got the size down. And then once I've made that, I'm going to create these other ridges. And you know where to put the ridges are a couple places. One, there might be a ridge that can extend out into another area like this. I see also another place that you can put ridges is on the joints right here. So there's a joint right here. Let's create a ridge there. Let's create another one right here. Another one here, right where those joints are. Those are good locations to kind of create these smaller branches. Let's create some other branches here. Let's also create maybe another one that goes here, here, here like this. Make sure it's kind of following wherever the terrain is. Follow one here. And just a simple rule. If you want to show that the smaller branch, this kind of part of the range is longer, just make a longer line. And I recommend that you have varying lengths, right? Have some lines be, some of the branching ridges be long and have some of them be short. So that way you have a variety, giving it a more natural look instead of a more procedural look of having all the same lengths. So that's helpful. Once you've done those secondary ridges, you're going to create the last of the ridges. And what I'll do is I'll bring the size down just a little bit more so I have a little bit smaller size here. And then what I'll do is I'm going to kind of get in close. And what I want to do is create these branches that are radiating out from the main ridge and the secondary ridges. So this is what it'll look like. Something like this. I'm having them kind of radiate off like this. Now, from what I can tell, the blur is a little too strong to see it correctly. So we'll go ahead and select them all. Just bring the blur down a little bit. There we go. Now I can see it a little bit better. Sometimes that happens where you're working on it and the blur is too strong. That's fine. There we go. Now that that blur has been taken care of, now I can go back and continue making these lines that radiate out from the ridges, right? So I'll have going here like this. Again, I'm using a pen and I'm having them radiate outward. You notice how I start from the ridge and then push outward like that to create those other ridges. So I'll go out like this, create my ridges. And you're gonna do multiple lines to kind of create these ridges, right? Have them kind of fan out a little bit here, go inward, create a little fan. Just think of it as creating like the ribs on a leaf. Think of it that way, because you'll notice that there is a main vein and then these little tiny veins that kind of go off of that ridge there. It's the same concept, right? With those leaves. They have these kind of ribs, and then you kind of place these smaller ribs that kind of emanate out like this. There we go. I think overall that looks pretty good, and it fits well in with the terrain. Once I've kind of done that, I'll go ahead and just go ahead and group the whole thing and just call it the line work. And now I have this ridge right here. This is that black line work. Now, once you've kind of created one mountain, you kind of can figure out how to make the next ones. So what I'll do here is I'm going to do what's called the highlights. And what I need to do is I need to establish where the light source is. So let's just pretend that this thing right here is a light source and it's kind of emanating that way, right? So the light source is going this way, facing that way. So that means that this side right here is going to be the light side. And this side right here is going to be the dark side, okay? Now that you've established, because the thing is that to show height, if you want to show like, well, wait a minute, how do I know the depth, how tall this mountain is, how big it is, or what the dimensions are of it? It's light and shadow, right? Light and shadow is what gives dimension. And the way that you show light and shadow is through a technique called contrast, right? We're going to go through contrast. Now, before I do the shading, I'll start with the highlights first, because now that I've established where it is, where the light is, I can put in some highlights, and I'm going to use the line tool to do that. So I'll go ahead and just use this line tool. I'm going to use a white line. I'll maybe bring the blur up a little bit more and maybe bring the size up a little bit more. And then what I'll do is, now that I know where the light is, I can establish where the highlights are. So I'm going to have some light here. And in fact, why don't we bring the opacity and bring the size up even more? I want to make sure that I can really get, there we go, really get that light in there. There we go. So all along this ridge, you would see light. Light would be here, along this ridge, following along here. It would go along here in this ridge, along there. You would see some along this ridge and along here. There we go. And I'll go ahead and take all of those, and I think they're a little thick, so I'll bring the opacity down just a little bit. There we go, not too much. Now we have the highlights. And then from there, I'll go ahead and create group, and then I'll call it Mountain 1, or Fold Mountain 1. There we go. Okay. So now I have this mountain here that I've created. It was specifically built for this part right here. So I'll put that back there. But you could copy and paste them and just edit them where need be, but you'll find that helpful. So now that we've done that, now we need to do the lighting and the shadow work, because we need to determine what's the dark side of the mountain, what's the light side of the mountain, right? So what I'll generally do here is you need to establish what kind of textures that you want to use. We'll go with some basic stuff. What I'll normally do is just take whatever the ground texture that it already exists, and I'm going to make a couple variations of it. I'm going to have one variation that's going to be at 100%, and I'll have another variation where it's quite dark. Let's say around 50%. That's quite dark. Let's make it even darker. Let's go 40. Let's take it down to 40%. So this is going to be quite dark. And what I'll do right away is I'm just going to go ahead and just paint right away. It shows up in my recents, or I can add it to my favorites. Actually, let's do that. I'll add that one to my favorites. I'll add that one to my favorites. And then we want another variation of this texture as well, where it's a little bit brighter. So I'll bring the brightness way up. There we go. And then I'll also add that as well to my favorites. So now in my favorites, I have these 3 variations of this texture. And what I'll start with first is my mountains. And I'm going to pick the right brush for this. So what I'll do is I'll go to my circle brush, go into here, and you have these nice dirt textures that are in here, dirt 1 and dirt 2. I find these to be quite helpful. Let's use those. And then we're going to bring the brush size way down. And then when you add this, you're going to make sure that you want to bring your opacity down a little bit, because this is really, really dark texture. And what we want to do is, just like a painter, we want to paint in our shadows, starting with the main area where all the shadows going to be. And then we'll make the shadows darker and darker where we want to show the most depth. So when in rules of contrast, the darker the texture, the lower the elevation is. The brighter the texture is, the higher the elevation is. That's why I've used those white highlights, my white line, as my highlights, because that's going to be the highest points on the map, right? So with this, let's go, I'd say about 25% looks good. And I'll go ahead and bring the brush down to a decent size. And what I'll do is I'll just go start right here with my ridges. Let's actually bring the brush size down even more. And we'll go ahead and start by just painting in right where the shadows is, just like this. And I'm doing single clicks, and I can start with a single pass like this, just paint in that whole section just to show that there is a elevation change there, and then go in and start in your smaller passes. So along your ridge, you want to have these nice dark light shadows here that really kind of represent the darkness, the shadows. And remember, the darker they are, the more contrast they're going to have. Don't forget to add the shadows along each ridge as well. Let's go ahead. Let's also add the shadow along this ridge here, this ridge here, this ridge, this one, right there, right here, here. There you go. And now you have all of that. Now you can also go in, now that we've done some of the darker parts, let's go ahead and add in a little bit of lighter texture right in here along this part here. And by adding in those lighter sections, it creates this illusion that these parts of the mountains are higher up. And I'm going to add also some of this lighter texture that goes away from it, because the way that mountains work is that there's the gradual elevation change as well as a major one the closer you get to the mountains. So to show this gradual elevation change, have some lighter sections going further away to show. And then you can also use that same texture if you want to show that maybe there's some ridges in here. I can paint in some ridges right here. And what I'm doing is I'm painting in a sense of terrain, right? The changes. So you remember the trick is that you use darker colors to represent depth, and then you use lighter colors to show depth or to show height, right? Okay. All right, so you have multiple options on how to work with it, right? So you notice here that when I take the mountain away, you'll see what it looks like without the line work, right? So now that I have my line work there, I have this nice mountain range with my various textures in here. The other things that you can do, the last thing that I recommend is that you can also use snow to create the highest points, right? Some snowy points. My recommendation is to go with maybe fantasy battle maps. You'll see this snow right here. This should work well. Let's change the texture, change the scale. Remember, we're using a battle map texture, so it's probably best to scale it way down to fit to the scale of this. And then what I'll do is I'll bring the opacity up quite a bit, so I don't have to do this multiple times. And then I'll just go ahead and bring my brush size down a little bit. And then right where I want the peaks to be, and the peaks will be normally where the joints of where a major ridge meets a smaller ridge. So if I just go ahead and paint right here, let's go ahead and add a little bit of white here, a little bit of white here, a little bit of white right here. And I'm just going to create these points that kind of represent, I'll undo that real quick, that kind of represent a little bit of snow. Like this, put a little bit of snow here, here. If you don't like that, you can also just use a white texture as well. That works just fine. Like maybe you want to use a white texture. You don't like the white spackled look to it. That's fine. Go ahead over to a color, choose white. We'll bring the brush size down a little bit. And you can just apply a white little point right here. And these can kind of represent your highest points, right? Where the snow is. So you could do that. There you go. Okay, so you have a lot now, and then when you step away, you'll notice that there you go. Now you have this kind of natural looking feature. There you go. So it's not too complex. Now if you don't like the line work bit, maybe you don't want to do the line work, you don't have to. You can just paint your mountains with just using textures, right? You could also just use the lines as a guide and then paint in your light and shadows using the textures and not have to use the line work at all. Now that is a preference that's up to you on what style that you like, right? So it's a pretty simple complex simple process. It's just the main ridge, secondary, and then tertiary, the third ridges, and then you add in your contrasts, your light, your shadows, the highlights, and stuff like that. They're not too hard to put together, right? And you always create the land first, because this way it's going to make sense, right? If you make the mountain first, then you'll have to conform the land to the mountain. But if you make the land first, then you're conforming the mountain to the land itself. It always makes more sense to have the land before you would create that. So let's kind of go over our next type here. So the next type of mountain, I'll go ahead and show this real quick so you can see it, is a block mountain. A block mountain is going to be like a mesa, right? It's going to have a flat surface at the top, while it's going to have some lines going down to show that there's some height to it. It's going to be different than fold mountains, okay? So let's go over how we would make some mesas. Let's go over that. So let's go ahead and turn this off. One of the first things I'll do is go over to my land, and I'm going to go ahead and choose like a mesa like texture. I'll go back to Fantasy World. We'll use maybe this orange texture right here. Let's bring the opacity down, and I'm going to pick a section where to put my mesas. And the thing with a mesa is these kind of mountains are a little bit drier. And so what we'll do is we'll place them not along a coastline. We'll put them more in what's called the interior, right? So I'll go ahead and put some mountains right here. This will be the interior. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint a region of this kind of orange texture. I'm going to use that dirt texture because I like it so much. And notice how this region is kind of more central to the, it's a little more central to the map. It's not all along the edge here. In fact, it's probably a little too close to the edge. Let's go ahead and just paint it a little bit further. I want it to be an interior. So let's go ahead and make sure that it's in the interior of the land. So now I have this nice texture here. Oopsie, that was the wrong one. My mistake. I'm using some the wrong texture. There we go. It's this one that I want. Oop, it's under favorites. That's why. My mistake. Okay, there we go. This one right here. This looks good. Make it a little more central. Okay. Okay. All right. Cool. All right, let's keep going. So now when it comes to making the block, my recommendation is that we're going to follow the same kind of technique. We'll use a line like this. I'll go through the various ones and see which one is the right one. I think that looks good. Let's bring the blur down just a little bit. I don't want it to be too blurred. That looks good. And what you'll do is you want to create the shape of the top of the mesa. That is the table, right? What we'll call that the table. And it can be whatever shape you want, right? Maybe I want it to be like this strange, like it looks like some kind of egg of some kind, an egg shape, right? This is going to be the main mesa. In fact, we can make a couple of them. Let's have one like this. Let's have a mesa, kind of a smaller one like this. Maybe a tiny one right here. We'll just make these right here. We'll make a couple and we'll go through each stages. So now that I've made the top part, now we can go to that next stage, right? Which is making the smaller ridges. So let's do that. I'll bring the blur down just a little bit more. And what we'll do is we'll have them just branch right off. Those are a little too blurred, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. And now if you want to show that there are, I don't recommend that these little ridges right here, that they're all the same length. Have some be a little bit longer than the others. Just what that's going to do is it's going to create a more interesting shape, and it's going to create varying angles of the slope when you do that. So as you're protruding these out, remember, don't have them all be equidistant or the same. Have them separated from each other, okay? So let's go ahead and put this here. What I'll do is I'll fix that blur. It's a little too blurry, I'd wager. There we go. It's a little better. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to follow that same concept with these ones as well. I'll go ahead and bring the blur down on these as well. It's a little too much. I don't want too much blur. Now we have this smaller one. Let me just make sure that I have that right. That looks good. And I'll do that same technique, right? I'm just going to have them jut out and away from it like this. Okay. There we go. Don't forget to have varying lengths. And you don't have to be straight lines. They can also be curvy lines. Just to let you know, you can curve them if you want. Straight is just one way to do it. You can add curves. And there's other things you can do as well. You can also create other ridges. So check this out. This one right here, what if I want to create another ridge like this, and then create a series of other ridge lines that go down like that? Or maybe I want to create another ridge right here, and then lines that go down here, because there's usually multiple ridges that kind of create this sense of depth, right? So if I kind of create multiple length ridges, don't even be afraid to add some ridges up here like this. Like maybe I want to add some ridges up here. Maybe I want to add some ridges along here. Maybe I want to add a ridge around here like this, here. Let's add another one right here like this. Because the mesa isn't just completely flat like a solid table. There's going to be bumps and grooves that's caused by weathering at the top. So add just a little bit of smaller ridges at the top so it doesn't look like just pure flat table, right? So we'll go like this. We'll add a couple more here like that. There we go. And then what I can do is I can go ahead and just group each one of these. Create group. Create group. Oopsie, it didn't group. My mistake. Create group. Same thing with this one. We'll create group. And then this one as well. There you go. So now that we have these, we can arrange them now where we see fit. So maybe I'll put one like right here. I'll put one here. Maybe we'll break it up by putting a smaller one like right there. And then we'll put another one maybe right here like this. And then I can go and just take the whole thing, change that arrangement, and just place it right there like that. There we go. So now my eggs are all set up. And then what I can do is I'm going to follow that same technique, right? Maybe I want to have this orange color as the base, but I want to have some shadows. So let's tweak, bring the brightness down to a darker variation. I'm going to go ahead and just favorite that right away. And then I'll have another variation of that that's going to be a bit brighter to show my higher points, right? So I'll just go like this. I'm gonna go ahead and just favorite that right away. Go to my favorites. Here is the darker variation for the shadows. You can use whatever brush you want. I'll go ahead and use the dirt brush again because I like it, but you can use whichever one that you feel works best for it. So I'll just go with, let's go with dirt 2. I do like that one. Remember to bring the opacity down. Okay, and then I'm gonna go ahead and create those create the shadows first. Remember we established where our light source is. So the shadows are gonna be all along here, this ledge right here. Let's go ahead and add a little bit, make it a little bit darker along these edges. Let's also just kind of make it branch out a little bit this way, like this. Let's also put a little bit of shadow along some of these ridges as well. There we go. And I'll go ahead and just single click just to also kind of get the shadow to kind of blend in. So if I do these single clicks like this, you'll notice that what I'm doing is I'm causing this to kind of blend in a little bit. And then because I've done that, I should add a little bit more darker texture along here to make sure that that kind of pops out a little bit more. There we go. And then it's okay to add a little bit of that same shadow along the whole edge. And the reason why is because you do want to show that there is a change, right? If I just put this side with just one shadow on it, it's going to look like that there isn't, the walls aren't kind of going up on both sides. So it's always okay to add a little piece that goes all the way around the whole thing, and then to add more on one side, right? And then we can go in with our lighter color and just go ahead and apply this lighter, brighter color on top, like this, right on top, to kind of create the highlight there. So now if I step back like this, you'll notice that I now have my block mountains there already set up for you. And you can make a whole bunch of them, right? So there's various ways that you kind of go about doing that. So now that we've gone through block, we should go to the next one. So I'll let that auto save real quick. I'm just going to select these and lock them so I don't accidentally kind of save them. Oops, I kind of missed a line right there, but I'll just delete that. That's fine. So now we have that put together. Let's go over to our next type. And where are we at for time? Oh, 30. Perfect. We're making great time. The next is a volcanic mountain. And that includes craters as well. I'll show you how to make craters. They kind of fall into the same category because a mountain can blow its top, or a volcano can blow its top, blowing off the very tip, the apex of the mountain, leaving like a crater. We have something in where I live. It's called Crater Lake. It's the exact same thing. So I'll show you how to make both a volcanic mountain that has its peak as well as a crater as well. So we'll go through both, okay? So let's go over those ones. Let's go ahead and close and turn this off, okay? Now, just like before, we made the top part of the table using a line. We want to do that same thing, but instead, what we're creating with this egg shape or whatever, we're going to be creating a crater. So it's going to be going down into the ground. So we should follow that same logic. Let's go ahead and choose a texture that I want for the crater. Let's go ahead and use a kind of a grayish color. I think that should work out just fine. Let's go ahead and bring the opacity up and let's choose a location for that. I kind of like this piece right here. This piece right here just looks really nice. Why don't we just go ahead and just apply some of our grayish texture here. This is where where it's going to be. So I'll go ahead and just kind of put that in there. That looks good. Cool. All right. And then we'll go ahead and have this kind of volcano right here. So we'll do that. Let's go ahead and use the lines that we were using before. Let's make sure that I have the right line set up. Let's go back to the mountains here. Let me go ahead and just apply a line to make sure that I have it working correctly. There we go. I think this is the proper line. There we go. Okay. And so what we'll do is we're going to create this like circle shape, but don't make it a perfect circle. It's okay if it is a little oblong, okay? It's all right if it's not a perfect circle. So go ahead and just make that little egg shape that you have there, like that. So we have that egg set up. And then from here, we'll go switch over to our ridges. And the way that this works is there's going to be ridges on the inside and the outside, okay? So from here, I'll go ahead and create these ridges. Don't forget to have various lengths. We can even have some squiggles instead of straight lines, like this. We'll show maybe there's a back side and a front side. So on this front side here, we'll have the lines be longer, and then we'll have some shorter lines in the front of it. So we'll make these lines longer, like this. And then these lines right here will be shorter to kind of represent a shorter elevation or a greater slope. Okay, and then I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to have some lines going inward like this. And then don't be afraid to add in some other lines as well, like that, okay? Now, once you've put that together, we'll go ahead and just bring the size up a little bit, go like this. That looks good. Also, I'll go ahead and throw in the highlights. So I'll throw in a highlight like right there. You're also going to have your highlight along here in the crater as along the edge, okay? So now I have my highlights. Let's go ahead and create group. There we go. Now I have that group. Let's go switch over to our land. And then I'm going to go, again, I'm going to take my variations. I'm going to have a darker brightness variation, which I'll favorite. And then I'll go ahead and have a super bright variation as well. There we go. And I'll go ahead and favorite that right away. So if I go back into my favorites, I have those variations. Again, bring the opacity down. Let's say about 28 looks good. And what I'll do is I'm going to maybe just scale this up just a little bit bigger right here like this. And then what I'll do here is I want to first show the depth within the crater. So let's go ahead and just fill in the crater, because the crater is going to be, the inside of the crater is going to be the lowest point. So let's go ahead and throw in the darkest shadows inside where the crater is. I did one pass inside the whole thing, and then I put it nice and thick where that part of the crater is. Then we'll also add in the shadows on this side. So wherever you want it to go, we'll go out to here a little bit more. And then we'll add those thicker shadows along this ridge here. There we go. And then we'll also add some thicker shadows along there as well. And then don't forget to do one little pass along the whole thing. And now if you want to show that there's lava inside of it, you totally can. Like I just used that darker thing, but we can totally add in lava itself by just going ahead and just throwing in a little bit of lava in here like this. There we go. And now we have a little bit of lava, a pool. This is kind of right here. Let's go ahead and put in the sunniest part or the warmest part in the center there. There we go. There we go. And now you have a little bit of a volcano there. And of course, you can extend the line work too, just in case. Sometimes you might be like, well, I don't like the way that it looks. You can extend the line work, create ridges that irradiate and travel off. So maybe I want to have some ridges that kind of originate and kind of go off away and follow the coastline like this, some ridges. And then I want to create some line work here to create some cliffs. You can extend beyond just the mountain that you're making. Maybe you want to have some ridges along here. And then once those ridges are added on there, then you can go back to the line tool here and then just start creating some shadow, just a basic pass along here like this, and then go ahead and take that brighter one and then just add some brighter colors right in front of the ridge. So the trick here is to remember is that contrast is king or queen here. Okay, if you want to have a sense of if you want to have this sense of depth, then you need to put together your contrasts, right? Dark means dark further down, the lower down. Brighter means higher up. So using those contrasts is how you kind of put those things together. So now we have three different types of mountains. We have our folded mountains right here. We also had our block mountains, our mesas, and then we also have this. Now, technically, I think this is more of a crater because of how big the crater is itself. If you wanted to create the volcano with the tip still active, then you would probably want the hole at the top to be smaller. So what you could do is you could just copy and paste this and you would make it a little bit smaller like this. And I think right about there is where you would have it. So really the bigger the hole is probably going to be more of a crater. The smaller it is, you'll probably want to make it a volcano. Now, I will make both because I just want to make sure that we have both, and I'll use a different thing. Where are we at for time here? Cool. We have enough time to make the volcano, and then I also want to show you some cool techniques as well, because I want to be able to fit in as much as possible. But I hope you're kind of getting the general idea. Just know that it is time consuming to do it this way, but you do get way better results. And there's also other techniques for this. You could also use, remember I mentioned using different lines. I can kind of go over that as well. Let me go real quick. I'll show you. If I was to go over to, I believe it's this one right here. I did mention that you can also use these lines right here as well. Like I kind of noticed that you can use these kind of hills right here. It has this nice kind of jagged effect to it that makes it a little bit more interesting. If you are going to use this, just know that you're going to absolutely have to use harder brushes to kind of get the contrast to define it, because you're using all of these ridges here. And so the line work becomes less defined. So if you're going to do that, just make sure that you make your shadow work hard, a little bit harder lines so that you can kind of see it. But it's kind of an easy way to kind of set things up. So let's go ahead and make that other volcano. And in fact, we'll put it right next to this one, because a volcano generally isn't going to be running solo. It generally will be within a range of some kind. So let's make a couple of those, all right? And in fact, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just kind of steal one of these mesas over here. I'm going to give myself less work. I'm going to copy and paste this and then just move it over to here, and I'll make some adjustments to it. Remember, work smarter, not harder. So why don't I take a couple of these and I'll just adjust them to fit in. So I'll go ahead and what I'll do is I'll scale it up really big so I can see it better, and then I'll make my adjustments to it. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and have the hole be right here. Oopsie. Right here like this. It's too much of a circle. Let's go ahead and instead make it be a little bit more like, there we go. It's not a perfect circle. And then I can have my ridges kind of going out from here. Notice how the shape is different, right? The bottom part is not the same shape as the one beneath it, right? That's important because I want to show that a mountain isn't a perfect cone, right? It might have ridges that go further out away from it and that might go closer to it, right? So make sure that when you do show the multiple ridges, have them be in different spots, right? It's going to be kind of helpful. So now that I have that, I can go ahead and scale it back down to the original scale it was supposed to be at. And I'll go ahead and just place it right here like this. Let's go and place it. Oh, let's put it right. Let's go ahead and move around. Take a look at my options here. Why don't we connect it a little too, I don't want it to be perfectly horizontal. Let's actually connect it right here like this. That looks good. And we'll use my varying textures. So we'll create the ridge here. There's also going to be a ridge right there. We'll also go ahead and put our lighter textures in here all along this side for those lighter textures. There we go. We'll also just add a little bit of light texture here to kind of create this sense of elevation change as well. There we go. Put a little bit of elevation change here as well. There we go. Okay, and then we'll pick a little bit of ridges. We'll put a little bit of lighter, darker work here to create this sense of further elevation change. So like this is a little bit further down. We'll create some darker pieces here. There we go. And see, this is what it means to kind of paint in your terrain. You can just paint everything. You don't have to use any stamps at all. Just use the texturing. Just remember to use that technique of contrast. That's it. So I'll go ahead and put this up here, a little more shadow along here, and then I can go in and just kind of add in a little bit, just like that. There we go. And now I have another one down like that. There you go. And so you can see that it's not too complex, actually, to kind of make top-down terrain. It's just a lot of work, I would say, but it's totally worth it. It gives it an amazing look. It looks more interesting. I'm gonna go and check the time, 3:42, perfect. Okay, I wanna go over another technique of this, even though I've already kind of showcased it, and that is to just use shadow work instead. So why don't I actually make a mountain range just using shadows so that I can kind of show you how I would put that together. I go back to my favorites, and the way that I would do this is I would start by making my contrasts and my shadows first. So if I wanted to make a range, I could go like this. Let's go ahead and bring the opacity up a little bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a mountain range just like this. This is going to be the shadow. So I'll go in right here and just kind of add a little bit of darker shadow on the left side because that's where the light source is going to be on there. So I'll go ahead and create that. And then maybe I'll just paint a little bit of shadows along here like this. Just paint in those shadows, get in the harder ones here. Go ahead and take that lighter texture, go ahead and put it on this side like this to kind of create the lighter part of your terrain here, like this. There's that lighter terrain. Let's go ahead and use also, I can use my whiter color. Let's go with color here, white. There we go. Apply that, and I can get my little bit of my peaks in here like this. Don't make them too equidistant from each other. Just have one just kind of rando over here, one right here like this. And then I can go back and I can create some more ridges. Go with this one. Let's bring the size down a little bit to about 11. And then I can kind of create these branching kind of ridges that kind of go out like this. So you can paint as well if you wish. So it's up to you which technique you think works best for you. If you don't really like the line work and the blurred look, that's fine. You can always just paint it in, right? Painting allows you to kind of do different things, right? And then I can paint in some rolling hills that kind of go off away from it, right? Some hills branching off. So I'll put some hills over here, hills right here, and then a little bit of shadow to represent that side. So a hill there, a hill there, a hill there with a little bit of shadow work. Hill here, here. There you go. And so I'm kind of so you don't have to use, if you don't want to, you don't have to use the line work if you want. You can totally just paint it yourself. The trick is just you first need to establish the shadows part, so that way you kind of have some contrast. And then to do that, you'll have to establish where the light source is. Then just start painting in your shadows. And you don't have to start with shadows too. Maybe you want to paint your highest points first, right? So paint in your highest points with a lighter texture, and then you can start putting in your shadow work after that. So it's up to you which method works best for you. Some people will have different techniques, but definitely experiment with brushes and to see which one works best, right? I painted in basically a folded mountain. What happens if I wanted to make like a mesa, right? A flatter top right here. These might be more of a dome type of thing. In fact, we didn't even cover dome. Let's actually go over that. But we'll use textures for it. So let's say that I want to create the highlight first. Let's go ahead and bring the highlight way up. And I want to create this kind of dome. And the way that the dome works is I don't want it to be an absolute perfect circle, okay? It's all right if it's a little oblong or a little off. That's okay. In fact, I'm going to bring the brightness up on this even brighter so that way I can really, really get those bright highlights on there. There we go. Really get those highlights. So now I have this kind of the top of the mountain here. Let's bring the opacity back down here. And what I'll do is I'll add that first layer to create depth. And what I'll do is I'll also create the shadow like this. There we go. And then I'll add in my darker shadows along here like this. And now I have my darker shadows to kind of represent my hill. So really it's a trick of just light and dark. That is how you create contrast or create depth on a map. So it's quite simple, right? And then you can make whatever strange, bizarre shapes that you want. So like if you wanted to create like maybe a series of weird like little curly cues like this, or maybe you wanted to have some curve in like this. You wanted to have a little curve here. Maybe you wanted to have a series of like bigger ranges that are kind of connected to this curve. Maybe you want to have some small hills that kind of branch off from there like this. Maybe you want to have a mountain range that kind of goes like this. You would start with the highlights and then kind of just move your way, right? Start going over to the lower bits and then add in your shadow work. Just like that. Add in your shadow work. No, don't forget, put it in there, and then add in your darker texture like this. And then you can also add in tiny little bit of dark spots to show various heights, so it's not all the same height. So really trying to figure out how to put it together is pretty easy. And what's also really cool is that you don't have to use the same colors. You know, maybe you want to have this more brownish color that looks more interesting because, right, some of the peaks might be a stone like color, right? So if you want, you can change the color, maybe make it a brownish color instead to kind of show this kind of brown like stone. That way you don't have to use the same color, right? Maybe you want to add in a different color. Let's maybe add in this kind of more brownish color here. And I'll go ahead and paint in some of my browns in here. Like this, just throw in, that way you have this various terrain, right? Explore with texture, right? Let's maybe take that white color to show some peaks. A peak there, a peak there, a little bit of a peak there, right? So you're kind of figuring out how it kind of works, right? It's just using those contrasts to make your shapes, right? So just kind of paint, and remember to kind of make it conform to the land itself. Don't try to make the mountain first. Make the terrain first, and then that way it's easier to kind of pull where the mountain is and where it should be placed and how it will conform to the land itself. So I think this was a pretty good stream. We got a lot done here. We were able to cover everything. Just know that I will be making multiple of these companion guides. Oopsie, I have a layer mask on there. We can just remove that. Let's go ahead and delete that. There we go. Just know that I'll be making multiple of these, just so you know. So there'll also be the fold, the those table ones, the block, all of those. So I'll make a guide for every single one of those, so that way you don't have to watch this video the whole thing through. I'll also cut it up into clips as well, and I'll probably time lapse some clips as well, so that way you don't have to, people don't have to watch like the whole hour thing. But hey, I think this overall kind of gave you a general idea on how to put it together. It's not as complex as you think. I mean, obviously having a pen is going to be helpful, but you can do all of this stuff with a mouse. Just know that when you do with a mouse, it just takes a little bit longer. I find that the pen works better for making those meandering like ridges and stuff like that, but you can do it with a mouse. It works just fine. It's just that it's gonna take a little bit longer. So just kind of keep that in mind. And if people like this type of mountains, they like this kind of guide, what we can do is I'll show you how to make an entire map in this style, right? Where the entire map will be nothing but either painted terrain or line tool terrain. And we can make it a whole series, because I know that sometimes you don't want to do the more cartoony fantasy style with the mountains kind of facing in an isometric thing. Sometimes you just want top down. You feel that style speaks to you. You like it, right? So we'll definitely create an entire series on how to go over that. I think that would be kind of fun. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Appreciate everyone in the chat, all the comments. People made great suggestions. They pointed out things. I want to shout out to everyone who kind of helped to answer questions in the chat, Musical Rogue, Payday, and the others. So I appreciate all of you for pitching in and helping out. All right, I will see you all on Friday. So please stay safe and healthy, and merry map making, everyone. I'll talk to you later.